Welcome to this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Today's conversation will be about the best of the rest, those films that receive some Academy recognition, but not for Best Picture. Just some simple guidelines. We're only going to discuss the nominated films that we've seen, so either I or my co-host have seen, and then have a brief discussion about that. So slightly different than a regular podcast. Okay, let's get started. We're going to do some alphabetical order here. Starting off with Osage County, which is receiving recognition for Best Supporting Actress for Julia Roberts and Best Lead Actress for Meryl Streep. My initial thought, I was not familiar with the Tony Award-winning play, and my instant impression was this was a terrible, terrible family who do terrible, terrible things. What about you?
Yeah, pretty much. I didn't really like any of the people in this family. I think that's what's supposed to come off, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I know I read that test audiences didn't necessarily react that well either, so they try to give a kind of a bittersweet ending for Julia Roberts' character instead of having the, Meryl Streep crying in the lap of her house worker. So, they tried to kind of curve out the edges and make somebody at least redeeming.
Yeah, and I honestly think that was a bit of a mistake because I thought the writing in this movie was better than the actual acting. As blasphemous as that sounds, it's received 2 acting nominations, obviously, for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah. Well, I thought Julia Roberts does a good job. She gets a lot of the showy lines, but she's, kind of a de facto head or lead of the family, and I think she does a really good job. And Meryl Streep transforms again. I don't think it's one of her best performances. I was actually looking back. I have not, really seen a lot of Meryl Streep in recent years, but it's not something exceptional. Her voice and the ability to change her voice is something she does so well that other actors should take note. But nothing really impressed me too much by Meryl Streep today.
Yeah, I tend to agree. What really I like how sharply plotted it was. Like, I could see why it was successful on stage, and I think some of that was translated to film. And I think if they kept the original ending, like, as the movie was winding down, I could see, okay, now this member of the family is leaving. Now this member of the family is leaving eventually Meryl Streep's character alone. I think that was the ending they were going for. And then they just tack on the Julia Roberts with a bittersweet, melancholy end, which I think was a mistake. And I think it would have been a better movie because of it.
Okay. The next film we'll discuss is Before Midnight by Richard Linklater. And this is now the third movie of this very ambitious Before project. We're 2 big fans of this series, and it's being recognized for adapted screenplay. And once again, the screenplay and the characters. And it's kind of unfair that this is being based on a adapted category because, every concept they do is original. It's just based on characters that have come before. But I think it's a great third part to this series. I'd love one time somebody to give a supercut of basically the same kind of discussions that each film has and kind of put those together. I think it'd be an interesting way to view the film. But once again, the Before series is one of the best parts of cinema in the last 20 years. And once again, Delpy, Linklater, and Hawke do a great job.
Yeah, I think it's because this movie is just so different than anything else you see it usually nominated for Best Picture. I'm glad to receive some nominations still. It's one of my personal favorites from this year. And if I was curating 100% of the Oscar list, I would include it in Best Picture. But because it is a second sequel and because the movie is just so different from anything else, I could see why it wasn't nominated. But the main reason it was nominated is because of writing. And it does what so few films, even great films, can't do. It captures how people really talk.
No, I agree. And it's the conversation. This time we actually kind of see more of an expanded universe. It's not just Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, Jesse and Celine. We get to see some of their friends here in this Greek villa. So that's interesting to see how other people are talking and if these 2 characters have had these conversations that nobody else was taking part of. But it's a very good look at more of a mature relationship between the 2 and how, initial impressions and initial, judgments you make on a person change through time.
Yeah, I hope one day I'll watch each movie as when I'm as old as the characters. Like, okay, I've got Before Sunrise off the list. But now I hope to watch Before Sunset in my 30s and then Before Midnight in my 40s. I think it'd be an interesting experiment to see how I think of each movie at a different age.
Okay, the next film we'll discuss is Blue Jasmine, which is being recognized for original screenplay for Woody Allen, lead actress for Kate Blanchett, and lead supporting actress for Sally Hawkins. And it's loosely based on a Bertie Madoff type character and the consequences and the fallout for his wife, in this case, Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett's playing a very, what I thought right away, like a Blanche Dubois kind of character, somebody who's kind of thrust into a type of society that she's not used to. You know, she thinks she's superior, but then really she's the one who needs help from these people who are so-called lower class. So it's a very interesting look at class dynamics, and in any Woody Allen film, there's sharp dialogue, you know, black humor, and Blanchett's performance obviously it's on par, it's on key. You know, it's hard to see that she's, you know, made a magnificent transformation. It's not a transformative performance, but it's a very sharp performance nonetheless.
Yeah, there's nothing much to add on that. I mean, she covers a lot in this performance. It is kind of like she's playing many different roles, and they do kind of hint on that in the script where she goes by Jeanette and Jasmine. So it is kind of like she's playing a dual role, even though she is only playing one character.
Yeah, and how complex Jasmine is, you also need the equally complex and understanding performance by Sally Hawkins, who was, you know, a few years ago passed over by the Academy, but this year is getting a recognition. She plays a great, you know, down-to-earth sister who's been through a lot, but she still has that spirit for living, and that Sally Hawkins is an affectionate screen presence anyway, so the ability she can do for this character, like she does seemingly in every character she does, it made sense, and it's well deserved for her to get some recognition.
Yeah, I just really like that one scene where she finds out that Al, the man she loves, played by Louis C.K., actually has a wife. That, like, during that phone conversation, that letdown she has, it was just a great performance. Like, I really connected to the character with that scene.
Okay, I don't think this was my favorite of the recent Woody Allen films. Would you agree?
Yeah, I probably put Before Midnight there.
Before Midnight, after Midnight in Paris, you mean?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Midnight in Paris. Sorry, I got all my movies confused. Too many movies. Oscar time.
Okay, the next film we'll discuss is Great Gatsby, the adaptation by Baz Luhrmann of the classic American novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald that is being recognized in production and costume design. Now, when I realized that this project was a go, I was very excited because Baz Luhrmann, and obviously my fondness for Romeo plus Juliet, and his twist on what is a now modern classic, I think rightfully the nominees are production and costume, because even though I like his frantic style, it doesn't really work here in Great Gatsby. One of my favorite scenes in the novel is that hotel scene where everybody's sweating and drinking mojitos. First, nobody's drinking mojitos here. They're drinking whiskey. But I just love how that scene simmers, and I don't think anything really can simmer in a Baz Luhrmann film.
Yeah, I think if Baz Luhrmann directed the first half of this movie and he was able to completely exploit what as Scott Fitzgerald was saying, how much excess there was in that time, but another director took on the second half where it becomes more introspective, I think we could have seen. It would have been a weird dynamic, but I think we could have seen a much better movie because of it. No,
that's true, because it sort of kind of fell off the cliff 35 minutes in, and you're getting to the meat of the story, but then Luhrmann doesn't, I think, do an effective job. But that would have been cool just to see somebody else kind of take that second part over. Any thoughts? Did you think they hit the right tone in terms of costumes and the sets, really grand sets?
Yeah, this is a movie it's kind of like the big budget sci-fi movie that gets nominated for visual effects. Like, it may not be seamless, but it does the most with the most, which I think it still deserves credit for that.
Okay. Moving on, the next film we saw was Frozen, and I was the only one to see that film, which is nominated for Best Original Song and Best Animated Feature. And I think the film it's an interesting mix, because when I read it and when I'm watching it, it seems like a film that doesn't initially know where it's going. Like, they set up characters in a certain way, and then sort of midway through the film, they change the dynamic, which is interesting. It's something, you can't predict right away, but then also there's sense of uncertainty. You know, for a film or an animated feature, what we're used to is, great dialogue, great visuals. But here we kind of see, these two directors kind of not know what they have initially, and then kind of mold a film and mold themes for that film as they go. And then basically, obviously, a big part of this film is the music. I think 24 minutes of the film is in music or is sung, and the biggest song is "Let It Go," which comes about halfway through the film, and it's a really big number. A lot of great themes in it about who a person is and what they should really do for self-expression. So I think it fits well with the themes of the film, and I think people are right that it's a return. But I never say Disney ever went away from making quality animated films, but it does seem like a good leap forward in Disney Animation Studios.
Yeah, but I haven't seen the movie obviously, but I can see where they've made movies like Tangled and Princess and the Frog, but that hasn't really appealed outside of the girls demographic. Like, it's been popular in that demographic, but it seems like Frozen is appealing to all kids and all families, and even people who without families.
Yeah, it's quite strange that the two lead characters are girls, are women. So it's impressive that how it's fared at the box office, that it does have that universal appeal that many of the classic Disney films do have. Okay, the next film on our list is Inside Llewyn Davis by the Coen brothers, and it's being recognized for cinematography and sound mixing. And once again, I was the only one who watched this film, and my initial attraction obviously was I'm a huge fan of the Dylan scene or the Dylan music in the pre-Dylan era of Greenwich Village, and this film tracks Llewyn, who's he's a grifter, someone who's gone through a lot of pain and loss in his musical career, and now is basically kind of getting by. But when he's getting by, he's using people, and he's really tone deaf to what those people he's using need. And one of those characters, obviously, Jean, portrayed by Carey Mulligan, is maybe one of the only people who kind of stick it to Llewyn and kind of call him on his BS. But this film is a really good vehicle for Oscar Isaac, who I think is going to be a big star. But I think there's definitely problems with this film. It's almost too hate-filled to have any kind of redeeming qualities in terms of character. And some of the supporting characters are just caricatures of what a folk singer is. So I can understand why, even with the expectations coming in, that this film is not nominated for Best Picture. Yeah,
this movie, if everyone expected to be in a Best Picture nomination like in November, December, then it steadily fell off. But it still gets that Academy recognition at the end.
Absolutely, and there's a great song, a Dink song, Fare Thee Well. I think that's even more than Let It Go. That's a song I can sing over in my head over and over. Okay, the next film on our list of Best of the Rest is Jackass Presents Bad Grandpa, which is nominated for makeup and hairstyling. And my co-host saw this film.
Yeah, this is Jackass Presents Bad Grandpa is it's kind of like a sequel to the Jackass movies and of course the Jackass television series. It's completely different from like most movies out there because there's pranks and hidden camera tricks throughout the movie, but it still carries the story. So I guess the movie that'd be most similar to is something like Borat. So Borat still had a story, of course, but then most of the people in the movie didn't know they were in a movie until after the scene was done. So I think it's an interesting experiment on film. Some scenes come out funny. Some scenes, I didn't really find them as funny. I think they went for the cheap humor sometimes. But just as a note, from people who think this movie is not highbrow, it does have other Academy Award connections. Spike Jonze makes an on-screen appearance and gets a writing credit for this movie.
That's high pedigree. What about the transformation of Johnny Knoxville into this grandpa character? Just from the trailers, it seems like he kind of morphs into it. How do you think that was?
Yeah, I mean, I totally bought it. Sure, he doesn't move like a grandpa, but if I was just walking down the street and they were filming Bad Grandpa with these hidden cameras, I wouldn't know it's Johnny Knoxville. So I think that the goal is achieved. And it still looks realistic to the audience. It looks realistic to the people walking on the street, and it looks realistic to the other actors in the movie.
Okay, the last movie on our Best of the Rest is Lone Ranger, which is nominated for visual effects and makeup and hairstyling. And once again, my co-host watches film.
Yeah, Lone Ranger. I think when Disney was plotting this movie up and greenlighting it, they were hoping for another Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, you have Gore Verbinski, who directed the first 3 movies, and then you have Johnny Depp, and then you kind of bring in a newer star, kind of like, I guess Orlando Bloom was a little more established than Armie Hammer is, but putting those two together in a sort of, and basing it on source material that people were familiar with, but they weren't they weren't that familiar with that they knew all the characters off the top of their head. So in that way, I think it's similar to Pirates of the Caribbean.
But do you think it's more of a reimagining? Because it definitely seems like they gave Johnny Depp more of a free reign, and it was less about the Lone Ranger and more about Tonto.
No, I'd say I guess they expanded Tonto role by giving him having him kind of narrate the movie throughout. And I think that kind of hurts the movie. I think it just makes it too bloated. When the movie really does shine in those few scenes is when it's just a simple B-movie action movie. And I think it goes for too much, and it's 2.5 hours is too long for this type of movie.
Let's talk about effects. Is there a set piece with a train, a great train robbery, one of those classic Western scenes that you would think merited the recognition for visual effects?
Yeah, it was really that last scene. You saw everything that came up in this visually stunning scene. Sure, the characters weren't that well formed, but you can't deny that these scenes were very well shot. Great effects from whichever studio produced it.
Okay, we're almost nearing the end of this edition of Inside the Academy Studio, and like always, we're going to end with word association. So when I say Best of the Rest, what do you think of?
Awards?
And I think of Before Midnight.
Okay.
So when we think of Best of the Rest, we think awards and Before Midnight. That is this edition of Inside the Academy Studio.
Thank you.